I'm Arizona Governor Doug Ducey and Chairman of NGA's Economic Development and Commerce Committee, and it's my honor to be here this morning, joined by North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper to chair this session on entrepreneurship. I think we all know in this new era and new economy, this is a time when companies can start and scale anywhere in the country and anywhere in the world. So to maximize these opportunities, we governors must work with private industry to create an environment where we can innovate and flourish. The conversation that we're going to have up here today, and it is going to be a conversation open for questions, will provide us a chance to share the successes that we've had while cultivating a culture of entrepreneurship inside our states. And I'm very excited to hear how organizations like Revolutions are helping our states disrupt and innovate every sector of our economy, and thrilled that Steve Case is joining us this morning. Let me touch a bit on some of the things that we're doing in Arizona to have an open for business attitude and have a competitive environment that's very dynamic with other states. We've had a moratorium on rules and regulation that have been renewed every year I've been in office. We've paved the way for self-driving technology in Arizona and welcomed Waymo, Lyft, Ford, GM, Into, and Too Simple, both national and international companies to the state. Entrepreneurs can crowdfund in Arizona for equity. We've been the first state in Arizona to pave the way for 5G, and we're also the first state to pass legislation to create a regulatory sandbox program to develop and test fintech products and services. So these are things that we are excited about, and things that we want to hear more about what's going on in other states and ideas that we can apply in our states. And with that, I want to hand it over to my partner on the Commerce Authority and Economic Development Committee, and that's Governor Roy Cooper from North Carolina. Tell us what's going on in North Carolina.
Thank you, Governor Ducey. I have a mission statement for North Carolina, and it's simply this. I want a North Carolina where people are better educated, where they're healthier, where they have more money in their pockets, and they have opportunities to live more abundant and purposeful lives. The third grade class I told that to a few weeks ago really liked the more money in your pockets part of my mission statement. But we want a prosperous North Carolina. We want a prosperous country. And we know that innovation and entrepreneurship is a way to get companies started, and they grow and they create jobs for a lot of people. For example, in North Carolina, we have the company Pendo, which started with Todd Olson, who is in Raleigh. He worked with Cisco, Google, Red Hat, started growing this company. Now they're expanding. They could have gone anywhere in the country with their expansion. They were being courted, but they decided to stay in Raleigh, North Carolina, because of our amazing talent cluster there. We have some of the greatest universities in the world in the Triangle area. In Charlotte, we're a global banking capital. What we're doing in North Carolina is trying to kickstart innovation and entrepreneurship. We've got about 1.6 million North Carolinians who have their jobs in small business. That's about 44% of our private workforce. So we know that we have to work hard to give people opportunities to innovate. Now, there's some obstacles that people are facing. One thing with young people is that we have about $41 billion in student debt in North Carolina. There are a lot of young people who have to get jobs with companies to help pay off these loans, and it's much harder for them to be in a position where they are able to innovate and they're able to start their own companies. So I've appointed a North Carolina Entrepreneurial Council to try to help us deal with these issues of student debt, issues in making sure that entrepreneurship and innovation is available for people of color, for women. We are the state that has the largest percentage of women in our tech workforce, and we're proud of that. And we're encouraging a lot of efforts that are out there right now. The American Underground is been named by CNBC as the startup hub of the South. And we're working, of course, to collaborate and bring innovators together, trying to attract that capital. We've also worked hard in the area of life sciences. We have the North Carolina Biotechnology Center that provides loans and grants to worthy startups to help them get going, and they've provided funding to over 3,000 projects in North Carolina. But we still have a lot of challenges. There's a lot of rural areas with lack of broadband. We want to make sure that not just tech startups and not just life sciences startups, but all kinds of businesses can start up and innovate, whether it's a barbershop or a farmer that wants to grow their business. Look forward to hearing from Steve today, and look forward to your questions, because we know there's a lot going on across the country to try to make sure that we stimulate our innovation and entrepreneurship economy.
Thank you, Governor Cooper, and now it's my honor to introduce this morning's speaker. Steve Case is the chairman and CEO of Revolution. This is a DC-based investment firm that partners with entrepreneurs to create businesses that are built to last. It's worth noting that in 2014, Steve and Revolution launched The Rise of the Rest, a platform to shine a spotlight on entrepreneurs starting and scaling businesses outside of Silicon Valley, New York, and Boston. Prior to Revolution, I think we all remember that Steve co-founded America Online, which changed the world and changed the way that we did business and became the world's largest online internet company under his leadership. I know it certainly changed the way we did business at Cold Stone Creamery. Steve today is the chairman of the Case Foundation, which he established with his wife, Jean, in 1987. Together, the Cases have invested in hundreds of organizations, initiatives, and partnerships with a focus on leveraging the internet and entrepreneurial approaches to strengthen the social sector. I want to welcome Steve Case to the National Governors Association. Thank you for being here, and I want to turn it over to you to hear from you.
First of all, thank you, the NGA, for focusing on startups, focusing on trying to level the playing field in terms of opportunity. This is a great nation, and it's worth remembering that 250 years ago, it was sort of a startup. It was just an idea, and now it's the leader of the free world for a lot of reasons, including obviously a reasonably resilient democracy, but also because entrepreneurs kind of led the way in the agricultural revolution, then led the way in the industrial revolution, then more recently led the way in the technology revolution. We went from this fragile little startup nation to the strongest economy and therefore obviously significant global influence. So the question to me is, are we going to continue to maintain that leadership position? I think we can. I think we should. But we only can, I think, if we level the playing field. And so everybody everywhere really does have a shot at the American dream. And I was surprised when I got into this work 8 or 9 years ago. I was asked to co-chair the National Advisory Council on Innovation and Entrepreneurship as part of the Commerce Department. That led to an initiative that the White House launched called Startup America, which I chaired. I also worked with President Obama on his Jobs Council and helped pass the Jobs Act. So I kind of stumbled into some of these policy issues, but I did not realize until then that essentially all the jobs are created by young, high-growth startups, not by small business, not by big business. Small business accounts for a lot of jobs. Big business accounts for a lot of jobs, but doesn't account for a lot of net job growth. And 1% of the startups account for 40% of the jobs. So we need to focus on startups if we're going to get the job creation engine going. And not every startup wants to or needs to raise venture capital, but there is a correlation between the ones that do and the ones that grow faster and create the most jobs. So here is the data that that really has led us to kind of focus on this with Rise the Rest, and led me to write the book, The Third Wave, that we passed out to the governors. Last year, in this country, 75% of venture capital went to 3 states. California, New York, and Massachusetts got 75% of our capital. California alone got 50%. The other 47 states fought over 25%. Number 2, last year over 90% of venture capital went to men, less than 10% to women. Last year, less than 1% went to African Americans. So even though we are a great entrepreneurial nation, I'm proud of it, we all should be proud of it. The reality is it does matter where you live, doesn't matter what you look like, and it doesn't matter who you know, whether if you have an idea, you can really pursue the American dream. And so that's why we're trying to get capital from the coast, backing entrepreneurs in other places through this Rise of the Rest Fund. We've backed 110 companies in 35 states in the last several years, and we're going to keep at it. We really believe this is a way to make sure there is opportunity for everybody and deal with an issue. Again, all you governors have many, many challenges. I respect that. But I'm bothered by the fact that a Pew study came out recently that said 75% of Americans are anxious about the future, fearful about the future, fear the technology, this disruption that we, my friends in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, celebrate. You know, for a lot of people, feels like it's going to hurt their family, hurt their community, and it's going to. We know technology is disruptive, and as we said yesterday, 200 years ago, over 90% of us worked on farms. Now it's less than 2%. That is, the fact that AI, robotics, things like that are going to disrupt jobs is not a surprise. The question is, can we offset that by creating jobs in all across the country, not just on the coast, which is why this is so important and why I'm glad the NGA is making it a real focus.
Thanks so much, Steve. And Steve and I share something in common. We both started our careers at Procter & Gamble, and he's aware of the initiative of Search and Reapply, which is actually looking for best practices around the world that you could bring back to the headquarter office and apply legally and ethically and with attribution. And we certainly did that at Cold Stone Creamery. We looked for the best franchise models, the best branding models, the best unit economic models. I'm curious, as you travel the country, what models do you see in other states that governors should be aware of? And what best practices do you see among entrepreneurs so that they can access capital outside of the markets of Boston, New York, and Silicon Valley?
There are some things beginning to happen in different states as laboratories have. We've seen interesting things as we've traveled around. We've now visited 38 cities. We've done these bus tours a couple times a year, 10,000 miles. So we've been all over the country, places like Nashville and New Orleans and Phoenix and Raleigh, Durham and Buffalo and Chattanooga, really all different parts of the country. And there are interesting things happening. There is a sense of possibility there. And I think the key thing to watch as governors, if you're looking for particular metrics, is tracking the flow of capital. Are you getting a greater share going forward? And also tracking what's happening with talent. Because what's happened really all across the country, I'm sure in all of your states over the last half century, is an enormous brain drain. Some people that were growing up in your communities, went to your great universities, then left, usually to go to the coast, because they thought the opportunity was better there than it was if they stayed home. How can we slow that brain drain and indeed create a boomerang of people starting to come back? And we have seen that in different cities. I think the three things to focus on, I talked about it in the book. One is driving more collaboration. It's amazing to me as I've traveled around how, even though there are interesting things happening in different cities, there are often, even in those cities, including some relatively small cities, not awareness of what's happening and not a lot of the partnerships that are natural, whether between the university and the companies or the startups or the mayors or the governors or what have you. Kind of the whole idea of driving more network density, driving more collaboration is critically important. Celebration is also important, which actually led to the creation of Startup America. And this is something where the governors obviously can use their bully pulpit to really talk about the role startups and entrepreneurs play in building better products and services to make our lives better, but also in building and sometimes rebuilding and reimagining the communities and playing a role. President Obama agreed as part of that to host the first ever White House demo day where we brought startups from all over the country and they pitched to the President of the United States. That was less about the startups and their pitches and more about basically sending a signal that this country cares about innovation, cares about entrepreneurship. So celebration is a big deal. I think the governors, some of you are doing a lot of that. I'd encourage you to do more of that. And the final one you did mention, which is the capital. What are things you can do either in tax incentives? Some states have done angel tax credits, or figuring out ways to back some of the regional venture funds or get more capital backing some of those regional venture funds. So there is more capital available to entrepreneurs in different parts of the country.
Thank you. Governor Cooper?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about the abysmal statistics of people of color and women being able to get into the startup economy. I think companies have found that diversity of a workforce makes you more profitable. And in North Carolina, we're working to encourage diversity, I've set up a historically underutilized business effort to provide more state contracts to minority businesses. We also see in our startup world an organization called Black Force at the American Underground and Black Tech Charlotte. You see Girls Go Cyber in trying to get to young women early at an age to get them interested in STEM courses. But what have you seen out there? What can we do to give more opportunities to minorities and women in this innovation economy?
It's a huge opportunity. There are some communities that are really focusing on inclusive entrepreneurship as something that really can differentiate them and really bring more people into the innovation economy. But the reason it's a challenge, venture capitalists say that the best way to be successful in the future is to be good at pattern recognition, seeing what's successful already and do more of it, which kind of makes sense, and there's some logic to it. The problem with that is if in the past the things you've been doing are only backing certain kinds of entrepreneurs who look a certain kind of way that happen to be in certain kind of places, you're missing out on a broader kind of array of human potential and entrepreneurial potential, innovation potential. And in this, what I've called the third wave of the internet, where the first wave is getting everybody online. The second wave has been software and services, Google, Facebook, et cetera, running on top of the internet. And this third wave, it's really integrating the internet in everyday life. Things like healthcare, education, transportation, food, agriculture, smart cities, things like that. We need everybody on the playing field all across the country if we're going to win in what's now a much more intense global competition around entrepreneurship. Some of the expertise in each of these sectors, as you know, are in the states in the middle of the country, not just on the coasts that are getting a lot of the venture capital. And some of the people that bring the perspectives they need are going to be people that are not just the usual suspects that the venture capitalists have backed in the past. And we've seen this firsthand. When we've done these, in every city we visited with Rise the Rest, we've done a pitch competition. Usually about 100 companies apply to pitch in each city. We pick the top 8 or so, and we have a panel of judges, and then we invest in the winner of the pitch competition. Half of the last 10 pitch competitions have been won by women. So if you're more intentional about it and you really make sure that you're considering and you're actively trying to source entrepreneurs, ideas, startups from a wide variety of places, reaching out to different kind of communities and give them the opportunity to be on stage and tell their story. There's some awesome, kind of companies that are happening, being launched all across the country. But it requires that intentionality and some of the efforts, as you said, American Underground's done a great job of this. There are many, many cities that are really trying to really make inclusive entrepreneurship kind of a big focus. And as governors focus more on inclusive, focus more on impact-oriented, purpose-oriented companies. It's a big trend, and focus on creating a more interconnected, entrepreneurial community. I think that's going to be the kind of the secret sauce to drive innovation, entrepreneurship more broadly across the country.
Certainly, certainly. I want to open it up for Q&A with our governors. And I think we've got a governor that knows something about technology, the governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum.
Thanks, Doug. Steve, I just want to start out with some gratitude and say thank you for everything you've been doing, not just today, but for decades, to try to drive attention to this issue. As somebody, as you know, that has spent my life trying to attract capital and talent back to the Midwest when it was all flowing to the coast, I really appreciate everything you're doing. But you talked about collaboration and celebration. With Rise the Rest, you've been to all these cities, but maybe share for the governors, what have you seen been the best collaboration models, the best celebration models, and how governors can support communities that are working together to support attraction of talent and attraction of capital back to the communities that are not been part of the 75% of VC dollars.
First met probably 25 years ago, 30 years ago, when AOL was still a little company. The idea of the internet was still, when we started AOL in 1985, so what's that, 34 years ago? Only 3% of people were online, and they're only online an hour a week. So most people didn't know or care about the internet. But people like the governor who focusing on Great Plains software and building a software company, we were colleagues in trying to get people to pay attention to what we were doing. I should say, because I know we have limited time, we did publish last year a playbook around what we've learned, lessons learned from Rise the Rest. So if people just search on Rise the Rest Entrepreneurial Playbook, you'll get a pretty I think, detail what's happening in different cities, what are some of the key things to, to focus on. On the specific question of driving more collaboration, it is really using your convening power to bring people together, partly to shine a spotlight on the role of entrepreneurs, but mostly to bring people cross-sector together. Again, it's always surprising to me that some of the large companies that in your cities, in your states, the Fortune 500 companies, for example, need to partner with the startups to stay agile and really understand what's happening. The startups, particularly in this third wave, and things like healthcare, it's actually not about the software anymore. That's sort of the table stakes. It's how you get integrated into health plans, how you get embraced by doctors and nurses and hospitals. It's a much more of a systems effort. The food system, similarly, it's a systems effort. Smart cities, similarly, it's a systems effort. So you need to build these connections so the bigger companies are likely to remain big companies by understanding what's happening around the periphery, around the fringes. And these small companies need some of that market access, some of that credibility that the big companies can provide. The universities are obviously a great place where people are learning things and ideas are being germinated, and the level of expertise there and some of the ideas being generated are fabulous, but most universities are not very good at getting those ideas out of the labs into the marketplace. So figuring out ways to encourage more of that entrepreneurship kind of connection to the universities is critically important. Different people are doing it in different places, and we're delighted to see some of the examples already that have percolated. But if we put much more of a focus on it, say the future of our, as you know, that every 25 years, half of the Fortune 500 turns over. Half. So if you're not focusing on the startups today, they're almost like planting the seed corn. Some of your big companies are going to fall by the wayside, and you're not going to replace it by new big companies, which is why this area of collaboration, celebration, and capital around startups in each state and trying to create that more level playing field is so critical. But there's more specifics in our Rise to Rest playbook.
We've got time for, I think, 2 more questions, and we're going to go to Governor Guerrero from Guam, and she'll be followed by Governor Hutchinson of Arkansas. Governor?
Thank you very much. I get so excited when I heard all your comments, because there is an idea that I wanted to do in Guam in terms of an innovative entrepreneurship, and that is aquaculture.
Yep.
Growing fish. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is partner up with our Guam Community College so that we start teaching our senior students, juniors, high school students about aquaculture. And then when they graduate, government could help them by giving them a pond and learning how to grow it, and then learning the marketing, the business, and so forth, and then going out and being entrepreneurs. So, and your comment about collaborating with the universities, our University of Guam has done the research for aquaculture. They just have a bit of a difficulty, like you said, bringing it out into the community. So I want to hook them up with our Guam Economic Development Authority. So I guess I wanted to say, how do we get these venture capitalists to come to Guam to help us with the equity, and maybe how to bring it out into the community and make successful entrepreneurs?
A couple points. First of all, I was born and raised in Hawaii, so I have some sense of what growing up on an island is, and aquaculture is one of the great opportunities. The first point I'd make is one of the things that, not surprisingly, is a key part of the playbook is for every state, every governor to focus on the 1, 2, 3 things that really do play to their strengths. There's something unique about them that really builds on their history, whether it be farming in Nebraska, or aquaculture in Guam, or healthcare in Ohio or Minnesota, or other kinds of places. Figure out what are the sectors. Don't try to replicate Silicon Valley. Don't try to compete with the social media companies in Silicon Valley. Figure out what are the things that really are unique in your particular kind of region, and focus more time and attention and driving those things forward. The second piece on capital is just trying to tell the story of what's happening in your city, state, region, and try to get more of those venture capitalists who do have the money on the coast willing to get on planes to visit. And that is, helping curate what the, potential opportunities. Here are the sectors we're focused on. If you're interested at the seed stage, here's some interesting companies. If you're interested at the venture stage, here's some interesting companies. At the growth stage, here's some interesting companies. Make it a little easier for the money on the coast to find the right entrepreneurs and the right opportunities in other places around the country.
Thank you, Governor Hutchinson.
What a terrific panel. Thank you for leading this. Thank you, Steve, for your investment of time and energy and innovation. In Arkansas, we are doing as other states are in terms of education. We greatly enhanced our computer science education programs, mandated it in every school. We also wanted to attract the talent or keep the talent in Arkansas rather than losing them to the coast. We have initiated and put $2 million every 2 years into accelerator programs, bringing top talent in financial services, in medical services, innovation and technology to Arkansas, having them mentored there, trying to attract those kind of companies to Arkansas as well. But I wanted to ask you about your first recommendation on collaboration, because one of the things we're trying to do is to have Innovation and Technology Council to bring those together. We just had a summit for that, but how can we do this better? What's the key to making that collaboration successful, to make sure the innovation community knows who else is there and can feed on the energy of each other? Any advice?
I had the opportunity a few months ago to participate in a Heartland Summit that was in Bentonville, bringing people around the country together, focusing on particularly driving some of this innovation, and particularly in some of these cities that have been left behind, even some rural areas that have been left behind. That is an example of how you're bringing people together cross-sector. There are people from obviously larger companies, some of the investors, but also people from the nonprofit sector, and driving that kind of discussion and shining a spotlight on the issue, both as a problem to solve and also as an opportunity to seize. And it really does require that convening. It requires that personal engagement and leadership that obviously governors can provide. I know you have limited time in the day and have a zillion things to focus on, but saying one of the priorities is to position your state as a startup state and position it as the place where capital should flow and talent either should stay or return or come from for the first place, and figure out ways to do that in a consistent way and make it clear that it's not just like a one-off photo op kind of thing. It's actually a core part of your strategy and one of your top priorities. And I also would encourage all the states, even though I have great respect for Amazon. Jeff Bezos has been a friend for 25 years. He's actually an investor along with several dozen other people in our Rise the Rest fund. But I also would encourage governors and mayors as well to focus less time on luring headquarters or factories from existing companies and more on birthing new companies. If half of the money that has been put on the table by 235 communities and half of the energy that went into making a bid to get Amazon's second headquarters went into the startup sector in each of those communities, they may very well create the next Amazon. So there's a focus, and I understand that some of the politics of you kind of have to take a shot at it, and the photo ops of they're coming now is more immediate than the seed corn planting that happens with startups. But in this third wave, I really do believe there's an opportunity for the big iconic companies, thousands of employees, tens of thousands of employees, to be everywhere. The partnership aspect is important, and as I mentioned, in some of these sectors, the expertise there, not just on the coast, it is in parts of the country. The policy, regulatory issues are super important, much more important than they have been in the last 20 years. So can you win the battle around talent? Can you win the battle around capital? And figuring out ways to focus on the celebration, focus on the collaboration are the best ways to do that.
Thank you very much, Governor, and thanks for your leadership on teaching our kids to code among the governors. And what great closing comments there by Steve Case as well. I want all of our governors and everyone in the audience to know that as you're considering fostering entrepreneurship, I encourage you all to read the NGA Center for Best Practices Economic Opportunities Division white paper on entrepreneurship. and that will be released in the coming weeks. I want to give a very special thanks to Governor Cooper for co-chairing this committee with me, and I want to thank you very much, Steve, for coming out this early Sunday morning and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us.
Thank you.
We're
It's a
grateful.
great honor to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.